Clara Thornton pressed her 4-month-old daughter against her chest and screamed into the blizzard until her throat tore raw. But the wagon train kept moving. 37 wagons disappearing into the white fury, leaving her behind with a broken wheel and a husband who'd vanished 6 hours ago. She'd begged them. God help her, she'd gotten on her knees in the snow and begged. And Harrison Cole had looked at her with something like pity before he turned his horse and rode away without a single word. This is the story of how abandonment became salvation, and how the cruelest night led to the truest love. Stay with me until the end, and comment what city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story travels. The morning Will Thornton disappeared started like any other on the trail. Clara woke before dawn to Pearl's hungry cries, her body stiff from another night on the hard wagon bed. 6 weeks of this. 6 weeks of sleeping on boards, eating dust, and watching the endless Wyoming territory roll past like God had forgotten to finish creating it. Hush now, sweet girl. She lifted Pearl from the makeshift cradle and put her to breast. Mama's here. Outside, she heard Will moving around, heard the crunch of his boots on frozen ground. November had turned vicious this past week. The old-timers in the wagon train kept shaking their heads, muttering about early winter and bad omens. Clara! Will's voice came through the canvas. I'm going hunting. She pushed aside the flap with her free hand. Her husband stood in the gray pre-dawn light rifle over his shoulder, their only horse already saddled. Now, Will, look at that sky. The clouds hung low and bruised purple-black and angry. Even Clara, city-bred Philadelphia girl that she was, could read danger in that sky. Storm won't hit till afternoon. Will didn't meet her eyes. He hadn't met her eyes properly in weeks now. Saw elk tracks yesterday. Fresh meat would be welcome. Take someone with you at least. Ask Mr. Patterson or... I don't need Patterson. The edge in his voice made Pearl startle against Clara's breast. Will's jaw tightened, then softened. He crossed to the wagon and kissed Clara's forehead. His lips were cold. I'll be back before dark. Promise. She wanted to grab his arm, wanted to demand he tell her what was wrong, why he'd been so distant since Fort Laramie, why he sometimes looked at her like she was a stranger he'd accidentally married. But Pearl was fussing, and the wagon behind them was already hitching up, and Will was swinging onto the horse before Clara could find the words. Before dark, she called after him. He raised one hand without turning around. Then he rode toward the hills, leading their pack mule behind him, and Clara watched until the prairie swallowed him whole. That was the last time she saw her husband. The storm hit at 2 in the afternoon. Clara had been watching for it all morning, her unease growing with each passing hour as Will failed to return. The wagon train pressed on 37 wagons, rolling steadily northwest toward the promise of Montana territory. Toward the ranchland Will had sworn was waiting for them. She'd believed him. God help her, she'd believed every word. Mama's worried about Daddy, she whispered to Pearl, adjusting the blankets around her daughter. But Daddy always comes back. He promised. The first gust of wind hit like a fist. The canvas cover snapped and billowed. Clara grabbed Pearl and braced herself as the wagon lurched. Around her, she could hear shouting, the crack of whips, horses screaming in protest. Keep moving! That was Harrison Cole, the wagon master. His voice carried even over the rising wind. Don't stop, push through. But Clara's wagon wasn't moving right. The wheels groaned and shrieked, and then came a sound like a gunshot, the crack of splintering wood. The wagon dropped hard to the left. Clara went sprawling, curling her body around Pearl, taking the impact on her shoulder and hip. Pain lanced through her, but Pearl was crying. Pearl was okay. Pearl was, Mrs. Thornton. Young Jamie Patterson appeared at the back of the wagon, his face white with cold and fear. Your wheels broke clean through. Iron rim split. Can you fix it? Not in this weather, ma'am. Not without stopping the whole train. The implications hit Clara like a physical blow. She scrambled to the wagon's opening, still clutching Pearl, and looked out into chaos. Snow had started falling. Not gentle flakes, but horizontal sheets of white driven by winds that howled like dying things. Through the maelstrom, she could see the wagon ahead of her pulling away. 10 yards, 20, 30. "Wait!" Clara screamed. "Please wait!" She jumped down from the wagon, her boots sinking into mud and slush. Pearl wailed against her chest. Clara ran toward the retreating wagons, ran until her lungs burned and her legs threatened to give out. Mr. Cole, please!" Harrison Cole reined his horse around. He was 53 years old, veteran of 15 crossings, and his weathered face held the look of a man about to do something he'd hate himself for. "Mrs. Thornton," he had to shout over the wind. "Where's your husband?" "Hunting. He went hunting this morning. He'll be back," he said before dark. "This storm will kill us all if we don't reach Willow Creek by nightfall." Cole's voice was flat, final. "That's 8 miles yet. I can't stop the train." "Then leave someone to help me. Leave tools. Leave—" "I've got 212 souls in my care, ma'am. Women, children, families counting on me to get them through alive." He looked at Pearl, and something like grief flickered across his face. "I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. But I can't risk them all for 2. Please." Clara heard herself begging and couldn't stop. "Please, I have a baby. She's only 4 months old. You can't leave us here to die." "Your husband will find you. He knows this territory better than—" "He doesn't know anything." The words tore out of her. "He's been lying to me. I think he's been lying about everything. And now he's gone. And you're leaving, and please, please, I'm begging you." She dropped to her knees in the snow. Harrison Cole looked down at her, looked at Pearl screaming against her chest, looked at the wagon train still moving, the gap widening with every second. "I'll leave you supplies," he said. "Food, water, blankets. When your husband returns, he can make repairs. Follow our trail to Willow Creek, then on to Fort Benton. We'll leave markers." "He's not coming back." The words hung between them. Clara didn't know where they'd come from, but once spoken, she couldn't unsay them, couldn't unfeel the terrible certainty that had been building in her gut for weeks. Cole's face hardened. "I've got to go, Mrs. Thornton. May God watch over you." He turned his horse and rode away. Clara knelt in the snow, holding her screaming baby, and watched the wagon train disappear into the white. One by one, the dark shapes grew smaller and smaller, until the storm swallowed them completely. Then there was nothing. Nothing but wind and snow, and the broken wagon behind her, and the vast empty killing prairie in every direction. Clara Thornton was 26 years old. She had a 4-month-old daughter, no husband, no horse, and a broken wagon. And she was completely, utterly alone. The first hour was the worst. Clara climbed back into the wagon on shaking legs, her whole body trembling with cold and shock and a fear so profound it felt like drowning. Pearl had screamed herself hoarse and now whimpered weakly, her tiny face red and wet with tears. "It's all right," Clara whispered, though it wasn't. "Mama's here. Mama's going to figure this out." Harrison Cole had left supplies at least: a sack of cornmeal, some salt pork, 2 canteens of water, an extra blanket. Clara inventoried them with numb fingers, trying to calculate how long they could last. 3 days maybe. 4 if she rationed carefully. But the cold. The wagon provided some shelter from the wind, but the canvas was old and the seams leaked. Snow was already accumulating in the corners. Clara could see her breath in thick white plumes, could feel the temperature dropping with every passing minute. "Think," she told herself. "Think, Clara. What would Papa have done?" But her father had died when she was 18, and he'd been a Philadelphia merchant who'd never seen a prairie in his life. What did he know about surviving a blizzard? What did anyone know? She wrapped Pearl in every blanket she could find, then wrapped herself around Pearl, creating a cocoon of shared body heat. The wind screamed outside, The wagon creaked and groaned, threatening to tip with every vicious gust, and Clara prayed. She prayed like she hadn't prayed since she was a child, since her mother used to kneel with her beside the bed and recite psalms. She prayed for Will to come back, prayed for the storm to pass, prayed for a miracle she didn't believe in. Hours passed. The light outside faded from gray to charcoal to absolute black. Clara drifted in and out of consciousness, jerking awake every time Pearl cried or the wagon lurched. Her fingers and toes had gone numb. Her mind kept returning to the same terrible thoughts. This is how we die. Frozen in a wagon on an empty prairie because my husband abandoned me and 200 people decided we weren't worth saving. This is how my daughter dies. 4 months old. She'll never walk, never talk, never know that her mother tried so hard to save her and failed. Around midnight, the wind shifted. Clara felt it before she heard it, a change in the wagon's movement, a slight easing of the constant battering. For one wild moment, she thought the storm might be breaking. Then she heard the horse. Hoofbeats, muffled by snow but unmistakable. Coming closer. Clara's heart slammed against her ribs. Will. It had to be Will. He'd come back. He'd kept his promise, But the hoofbeats were wrong. Too slow. Too deliberate. Not the frantic pace of a man racing to save his family. Clara reached for Will's pistol, the one he'd left behind, the one piece of luck in this whole catastrophe, and found it wasn't where she'd put it. The wagon's lurch must have sent it sliding somewhere. She couldn't find it in the dark, couldn't find anything, and the hoofbeats were stopping right outside. Hello? A man's voice, deep and rough, cutting through the wind. Anyone alive in there? Clara grabbed the only weapon she could reach, a cast-iron skillet, and clutched Pearl against her chest. Who's there? Name's Eli McAllister. I own the ranch 5 miles south of here. A pause. Ma'am, I watched a wagon train pass through my land about 6 hours ago. Counted 37 wagons going and 37 coming out. But I found tracks leading to this spot. Tracks that didn't lead away. My wheel broke. They couldn't wait. Another pause. Longer this time. They left you in this. The disbelief in his voice nearly broke her. Clara felt tears spilling down her frozen cheeks, felt something cracking open inside her chest. My husband went hunting this morning. He didn't come back. The wagon master said he couldn't risk the train for 2 people. Jesus Christ! The canvas flap jerked open. Clara raised the skillet ready to swing, but the man who appeared wasn't threatening. He was big, tall, and broad-shouldered with snow crusting his hat and coat, but he kept his hands visible and his movements slow. Easy, ma'am. I'm not going to hurt you. His eyes found Pearl, and his whole face changed. Something fierce and protective flashed across his features. You've got a baby. Her name is Pearl. She's 4 months old. And you've been out here how long? 6 hours, 7. I don't know. Clara's voice cracked. I don't know anything anymore. The man Eli looked at her for a long moment. Then he stepped back and began unfastening something from his saddle. Can you ride? What? A horse. Can you ride a horse? Not well, I'm guessing, but can you stay in a saddle? Yes, maybe. Why? Because this storm isn't breaking until morning, and you'll both be dead by then if you stay here. He reappeared at the wagon's opening with a bundle of supplies. My ranch is 5 miles south. It's a hard ride in this weather, but the house is warm, and my housekeeper will know what to do for the baby. I don't even know you. No, ma'am, you don't. Eli's gray eyes met hers, steady and calm despite the chaos of the storm. But you know the wagon train left you to die. You know your husband isn't coming back, not tonight, maybe not ever. And you know that staying here means that little girl freezes to death in your arms. Clara flinched like he'd struck her. I'm offering you a choice. Eli continued. Come with me. Survive the night and figure out the rest tomorrow. Or stay here with your skillet and your pride. He glanced at the cast iron still clutched in her frozen fingers. But if you're coming, we need to go now. This storm's got another 6 hours of fury in it, and I'd rather not be caught in the open when it peaks." Pearl whimpered against Clara's chest. So small, so fragile, so completely dependent on Clara to make the right choice. "My wagon," Clara said weakly. "Our things. I'll come back for it when the weather clears. Right now, all that matters is getting you and that baby somewhere warm." Eli extended his hand. "What's it going to be, ma'am?" Clara looked at his hand. She thought about Will disappearing over the horizon with everything they owned. She thought about Harrison Cole riding away without looking back. She thought about 200 people who'd decided she wasn't worth saving. And here was this stranger, this cowboy, who'd ridden out into a killing storm because he'd noticed one wagon's tracks didn't lead away. Clara put down the skillet. She took his hand. "Clara," she said. "My name is Clara Thornton." "Well, Clara Thornton." Eli helped her down from the wagon, steadying her when her numb legs nearly buckled. "Let's get you and Pearl somewhere safe." The ride through the storm was the most terrifying hour of Clara's life. Eli put her in front of him on the horse, his arms coming around both sides to grip the reins. Pearl was pressed between them, sheltered by their bodies, and the heavy coat Eli had wrapped around Clara's shoulders. The wind screamed. The snow fell so thick Clara couldn't see the horse's ears. She had no idea how Eli knew where he was going, how he navigated through the absolute white blindness, but he moved with quiet confidence, occasionally murmuring to the horse, occasionally shifting his weight to guide them around obstacles she couldn't see. "Almost there," he said against her ear when she started shaking so hard she could barely stay upright. "Quarter mile. Just hold on." Clara held on. She held on to Pearl, held on to the saddle horn, held on to the stranger's coat with fingers that had stopped feeling anything at all. And then, like a miracle, lights appeared through the snow. Warm, golden lights that meant shelter, safety, survival. Eli rode straight to the main house and dismounted, reaching up to lift Clara down. Her legs gave out completely this time, but he caught her one arm under her knees and one behind her back and carried her toward the door like she weighed nothing at all. "Aggie!" he shouted. "Aggie, open up!" The door flew open, spilling light and warmth into the frozen night. A woman stood silhouetted in the doorway, older, sturdy, with iron-gray hair and a face that shifted from irritation to shock in half a heartbeat. "Lord have mercy. Get her inside, now!" Eli carried Clara through the doorway into a world of heat and light that felt almost painful after hours in the cold. She couldn't speak, could barely think. All she could do was clutch Pearl and shake, and try to remember how to breathe. "Give me that baby." Aggie's voice was firm but kind. "Let me see if she's frostbit. This to Eli. Get blankets from the chest, the wool ones, and put water on to heat." "She was out there for hours," Eli said, already moving. "Wagon train left her when her wheel broke. Left her in this. Husband went hunting this morning and didn't come back." Aggie's hands paused in their examination of Pearl. She looked at Clara with eyes that had seen too much of life to be surprised by anything but something like sorrow moved across her weathered face. "Some men ain't worth the air they breathe," she said quietly. Then brisker, "Baby's cold, but she'll live. Good strong lungs on her, hear that crying. That's the sound of a fighter." She bundled Pearl in warm blankets and thrust her back into Clara's arms. "You too, by the looks of you. Takes a fighter to survive what you just did?" Clara tried to respond, but her teeth were chattering too hard to form words. "Don't try to talk yet." Aggie guided her to a chair by the massive stone fireplace, where a fire roared and crackled like it had been burning for hours. "Just sit. Warm up. Everything else can wait till morning." Eli appeared with blankets, then disappeared again. Clara heard him in another part of the house, heard low voices and the stamp of boots, heard a door open and close. Then he was back pressing a cup of hot coffee into her shaking hands. "Drink," he said, slowly. Clara drank. The heat of it spread through her chest like a benediction. She felt tears sliding down her face again and couldn't stop them. Didn't even try. "I thought we were going to die," she whispered. Eli crouched beside her chair, his gray eyes level with hers. Up close, she could see the snowmelt in his dark hair, the stubble on his jaw, the lines around his eyes that spoke of years squinting against sun and wind. He looked tired. He looked like a man who'd ridden through hell to rescue a stranger. "But you didn't," he said simply. "You're here. You're alive. Your baby's alive. The rest of it, your husband, your wagon, whatever comes next, that's tomorrow's problem." "Why did you come?" Clara had to know. "You didn't have to. You could have stayed in your warm house and told yourself it wasn't your concern." Eli was quiet for a moment. "My sister got caught in a blizzard 6 years back," he said finally. "Her and her husband and their baby girl. Wagon broke down same as yours. They were half frozen by the time a trapper found them." He paused. "If that trapper had decided it wasn't his concern, I'd have buried my sister and my niece and my brother-in-law in the same week." Clara stared at him. "So I don't leave people to die in storms," Eli continued. "Not when I can help. Not ever." He stood and moved away, giving her space. Clara watched him go, this strange, quiet man who'd appeared out of the blizzard like an answer to prayers she hadn't believed in. "Thank you," she called after him. Eli paused at the doorway. He didn't turn around. "Don't thank me yet, Mrs. Thornton. We still don't know what happened to your husband. We don't know what comes next." Now he did turn, and his eyes held something Clara couldn't quite read. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." He disappeared into the darkness of the house. Clara sat by the fire holding Pearl, listening to the storm rage outside and thinking about everything she'd lost. Her husband, her wagon train, her entire plan for the future. But she was alive. Pearl was alive. And somewhere in this house was a man who'd ridden through a killing storm because he'd noticed that one set of tracks didn't lead away from where they should. Clara didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time since the wagon train had disappeared into the snow, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she and Pearl might survive this after all. The fire crackled. Pearl slept against her chest. And outside the storm raged on, burying Clara's old life beneath feet of snow, while something new and unexpected waited to emerge. Clara woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of bacon frying. For one disoriented moment, she thought she was back in Philadelphia, in her childhood bedroom, with its lace curtains and feather pillows. Then, Pearl whimpered beside her, and everything came flooding back. The storm. The abandonment. The stranger who'd carried her through the snow. She sat up too fast, and her head spun. "Easy now." Aggie appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on an apron. "You've been through hell and back. Body needs time to remember it's still alive." "What time is it?" "Past noon. You slept 14 hours straight." Aggie crossed to the small cradle where Pearl was stirring. "Baby woke twice in the night. I fed her some sugar water, hope you don't mind. Figured you needed the rest more than she needed you specifically." Clara's throat tightened. "Thank you. For everything." "Thank me by eating breakfast. You're thin as a rail, and that baby needs you strong." Aggie lifted Pearl with practiced ease. "Mr. Eli's already out with the men. They're riding to search for your husband." The word husband hit Clara like a slap. Will. In the terror of the night, she'd almost forgotten, almost let herself believe he'd simply ceased to exist, that the storm had erased him along with everything else. "They won't find him." The words came out flat, certain. Clara didn't know where the certainty came from, but it sat in her chest like a stone. Aggie studied her with shrewd eyes. "You sound mighty sure of that." "He took our only horse, our pack mule. He said he was hunting, but—" Clara's voice cracked. "He's been acting strange for weeks, secretive, distant. I think—" She couldn't finish. "You think he ran out on you," Aggie said quietly. Clara looked at her hands. They were shaking. "The money?" she whispered. "We had $300 saved for buying land." Will kept it in a leather pouch in his saddlebag. "I just realized he took it with him. All of it." Aggie was silent for a long moment. "That don't mean anything for certain," she finally said. "Man going hunting might take his valuables, might not want to leave them unguarded. You don't believe that?" "No." Aggie's voice was gentle, but honest. "No, I don't reckon I do." Clara felt something break inside her. Not her heart that had been cracking for weeks now every time Will looked through her instead of at her. This was something else. Something like the last thread of hope finally snapping. "I'm such a fool." "You're a woman who loved her husband. That ain't foolish. That's just human." I believed him. Everything he told me about the ranch waiting for us in Montana, about the life we'd build together, I believed every word. Clara laughed bitterly. "My mother warned me. She said he was too charming, too smooth. She begged me not to marry him." Mothers usually know. And I didn't listen. I thought she was just being overprotective. I thought I knew better. Clara looked at Pearl in Aggie's arms. "Now look where my knowing better got us." The back door banged open. Clara's heart lurched, but it wasn't Eli. A young man stood in the doorway, maybe 19 or 20, with sandy hair and a face full of freckles. Snow dusted his shoulders, and his cheeks were red from cold. "Mrs. Brennan, Mr. Eli sent me back to—" He stopped short when he saw Clara. His hat came off so fast it was almost comical. "Oh, ma'am, I'm sorry, I didn't know you were— I heard about that as—" "This is Caleb Stone," Aggie interrupted smoothly. "He works the ranch. Caleb, this is Mrs. Thornton." "Ma'am," Caleb bobbed his head awkwardly. "I'm real sorry about what happened to you. That wagon train leaving you like that, it ain't right. It ain't Christian." "Did Mr. McAllister send you back for a reason?" Aggie prompted. "Yes, ma'am. He wanted me to tell you they found tracks, a single rider heading northeast toward the mining camps." Caleb shifted his weight. "Trail's pretty clear despite the snow. Mr. Eli says it looks like whoever made those tracks left before the storm hit full force." Before the storm hit full force. That meant Will had left deliberately. Had known the storm was coming and ridden away anyway. Had abandoned his wife and baby to die while there was still time to escape. "Mrs. Thornton." Caleb's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Clara wasn't all right. She might never be all right again. "I need air," she said, and pushed past him toward the door. The cold hit her like a wall, but she welcomed it. Welcomed anything that might shock her back into numbness, back into the frozen calm she'd felt during the storm when death seemed certain and everything else stopped mattering. She walked until her legs wouldn't carry her anymore, then sank down onto a wooden fence rail and stared out at the endless white prairie. Will was alive. Will had left her. Will had known exactly what he was doing when he rode away that morning with their horse and their money and their future. "You son of a bitch," Clara whispered into the wind. "You goddamn son of a bitch." "Mrs. Thornton." Eli's voice came from behind her. Clara didn't turn around. "Caleb told you what we found," he said. It wasn't a question. He left before the storm hit. He knew. "Looks that way. He was going to let us die." Clara's voice was steady now, cold as the wind. His own daughter, 4 months old, he was going to let her freeze to death in that wagon. Eli came to stand beside her at the fence. He didn't touch her, didn't offer empty comfort, just stood there solid and silent, while the truth settled between them. "I've sent 2 men to follow the tracks," he said. "They'll ride as far as the mining camps ask around. If your husband passed through, someone will have seen him." "And then what? You'll drag him back, force him to be a husband and father." "No." Eli's voice was hard. "Then you'll know for certain. You'll have proof of what he did, and you can decide what comes next." Clara finally looked at him. In daylight, he was different than she remembered. Harder somehow, more weathered. But his eyes were the same gray and steady and completely without deception. "Why do you keep helping me?" "Already told you. I don't leave people to die." "The dying part is over. You saved us. You don't owe me anything else." Eli was quiet for a moment. "My father used to say that out here the only thing that matters is whether you help or whether you turn away." He leaned against the fence, his shoulder almost touching hers. "I watched that wagon train pass through my land yesterday. 200 people, give or take. They knew you were back there. They knew you had a baby. And they left anyway. They had to. The storm, they chose to." Eli cut her off. "Every single one of them made a choice, and I'm making a different one." He looked at her directly. "You need help. I can help. Seems simple enough to me." "Nothing about this is simple." "No," Eli agreed. "But that doesn't change what's right." They stood in silence as the wind picked up swirling snow around their boots. "I have nothing," Clara said finally. "No money, no wagon, no way to get to Montana or anywhere else. I can't impose on your charity forever." "Who said anything about charity?" Clara frowned. "What do you mean?" "The settlement north of here, Millbrook. They've been looking for a school teacher since September. Last one ran off to marry a railroad man." Eli glanced at her. "You can read and write, I'm guessing. Probably better than most folks out here." "I attended finishing school in Philadelphia." "Then you're overqualified." Something that might have been a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Pays not much, $20 a month, but it's honest work, and it would give you a way to support yourself and Pearl." Clara stared at him. "You'd help me get a teaching position." "I'd put in a word, the rest would be up to you." A teaching position. A way to survive that didn't depend on Will or anyone else's charity. A future that Clara could build with her own two hands. It was more than she'd dared hope for when she'd woken up this morning. "Why?" she asked again. "And don't tell me it's because you don't leave people to die. This is more than that." Eli's jaw tightened. "Because someone helped my sister when she had nowhere else to turn," he said. "Because my father built this ranch with help from a Crow woman who could have let him freeze. Because—" He stopped, started again. "Because kindness is the only thing that makes this territory worth living in. And I'd rather be someone who offers it than someone who turns away." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. She'd married a man who'd promised her the world and delivered nothing but lies. And here was a stranger who promised nothing and delivered everything. "I'd like to teach," she said quietly. "If the position is available, I'd like to try." Eli nodded once. "Then we'll ride into town tomorrow. Talk to the council. Get you settled." He pushed off from the fence. "But first, you should eat. Aggie will have my hide if I let you starve on your first full day here." Clara almost smiled. Almost. 3 days later, Eli's men returned from the mining camps. Clara was in the kitchen, helping Aggie knead bread when she heard the horses, her hands stilled in the dough flour dusting her borrowed dress. "That'll be Hank and Samuel," Aggie said quietly. "You want me to go hear what they found?" "No." Clara wiped her hands on her apron. "I need to know." She walked outside on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. Eli was already in the yard talking to 2 dust-covered men who'd dismounted near the barn. One of them was holding something, a leather pouch, dark brown and worn. Clara recognized it instantly. "Where did you find that?" All 3 men turned. Eli's face was grim. "Mining camp called Deadwood Junction," said the older of the 2 riders. "About 40 miles northeast. We showed your husband's description around. Man at the general store recognized him right away. He's there. Was there, 3 days ago." The rider exchanged a look with Eli. "Ma'am, I don't know how to tell you this, but just say it. Your husband came through with a horse and a mule, sold both of them for cash. Bought a ticket on the stage heading west. The rider held up the leather pouch. This was in the trash heap behind the general store. Had your name sewn inside, Clara Thornton. Clara took the pouch with numb fingers. Empty. Completely empty. He sold our horse, she said slowly. He took our money and he sold our horse and he bought a stage ticket. Heading toward Salt Lake City, according to the station master. Salt Lake City, hundreds of miles away, another territory entirely. Will hadn't just abandoned her. He'd made sure she could never find him. Mrs. Thornton. Eli's voice cut through the ringing in her ears. Clara, look at me. She looked. This is proof, he said. This is evidence of exactly what he did. Whatever happens next, you're not crazy. You're not imagining things. He left you to die and ran away. That's not your fault. Everyone will know. Clara's voice sounded strange, hollow. Everyone will know my husband abandoned me. They'll whisper about poor Clara Thornton, the fool who married a coward. Let them whisper. Easy for you to say. You're not the one who... I'm the one who found you half frozen in a broken wagon with a baby in your arms, Eli interrupted. I'm the one who watched you survive something that would have killed most people. I'm the one who's seen what you're made of. His gray eyes blazed. And anyone who judges you for your husband's sins isn't worth a damn. Clara stared at him. No one had ever defended her like that. Not her mother, who'd always been more concerned with appearances than feelings. Not Will, who'd promised to cherish her, but couldn't even be bothered to let her die with dignity. This stranger, this cowboy who owed her nothing, was more outraged on her behalf than anyone had ever been. I want to teach, Clara said suddenly. I want the job in Millbrook. And I want to make my own money and build my own life and never depend on a man for anything ever again. Eli nodded slowly. Then that's what we'll do. Tomorrow. Clara looked down at the empty leather pouch in her hands. The pouch that had once held their future, their dreams, their $300. Then she walked to the fire pit behind the kitchen and threw it into the flames. Mrs. Thornton, Caleb yelped, lunging forward. That's evidence we might need. I don't need evidence. Clara watched the leather curl and blacken. I don't need proof. I don't need anything from Will Thornton except to never see him again. The pouch burned. Clara watched it until there was nothing left but ash. Then she turned and walked back toward the house to help Aggie finish the bread. The ride to Millbrook took 2 hours. Clara sat beside Eli on the wagon seat, Pearl bundled in blankets between them. The day was cold, but clear. The sky a brilliant blue that seemed almost offensive after the violence of the storm. Nervous? Eli asked. Terrified. Good. Means you care about doing it right. Clara glanced at him. Is that supposed to be comforting? It's supposed to be honest. Eli's lips twitched. Comfort comes later, after you've earned it. Millbrook was bigger than Clara had expected. A main street lined with wooden buildings, a church with a crooked steeple, what looked like a hotel, and a general store, and a saloon all clustered together, like they were afraid to be alone. People stopped to stare as the wagon rolled past. Clara lifted her chin and stared back. That's Henry Wallace coming out of the general store, Eli murmured. He's head of the town council. Be polite, but don't let him push you around. He respects strength. I've been abandoned by my husband and a wagon train in the same week, Clara murmured back. I think I can handle a town councilman. Eli actually laughed. It was a good sound. Warm and surprised, like he'd forgotten he knew how. Henry Wallace was a man in his 50s with shrewd eyes and a handshake that tested Clara's grip. He looked her up and down like he was assessing livestock, and Clara felt her spine stiffen. So, you're the woman Eli pulled out of that blizzard? Wallace said. I am. And you want to teach our children? I do. Why? Clara blinked. I'm sorry. Why do you want to teach? You're a city woman. Anyone can see that. Finishing school written all over you. Wallace crossed his arms. What makes you think you can handle ranch children? These aren't Philadelphia brats. They're wild as the territory they're growing up in. Mr. Wallace. Clara's voice was steady. 3 days ago, I was left to die in a blizzard with a 4-month-old baby. I survived. The day before that, my husband abandoned me with nothing but a broken wagon and borrowed supplies. I survived that too. She met his eyes. I promise you, whatever your children throw at me will be considerably less challenging than what I've already faced. Wallace stared at her. Then he burst out laughing. Well, damn, he said. She's got grit, Eli. I'll give you that. He turned back to Clara. $20 a month. You'll teach in the back room of the church. We don't have a proper schoolhouse yet. 12 students ages 6 to 14. Can you start Monday? Clara's heart hammered. Yes, I can start Monday. Good. Wallace stuck out his hand again. Welcome to Millbrook, Mrs. Thornton. Try not to let the children eat you alive. The ride back to the ranch was quieter. Clara sat with Pearl in her arms, watching the prairie roll past and trying to process everything that had happened. A week ago, she'd been married part of a wagon train, heading toward a future she thought she understood. Now she was alone, abandoned, and somehow starting over in a place she'd never heard of with people she'd just met. You did well, Eli said. I threatened to out-stubborn a town councilman. Like I said, you did well. Clara looked at him. Really looked at him for the first time since they'd left the ranch. What happens now? Now you teach. You save your money. You build a life. Eli glanced at her. And you decide what kind of person you want to be now that you get to choose. What if I choose wrong? Then you choose again. He shrugged. That's the thing about the territory, Mrs. Thornton. Out here, you can be whoever you decide to be. Your past only matters as much as you let it. Clara thought about that. She thought about the girl she'd been in Philadelphia, the wife she'd tried to be with Will, the mother she'd become when Pearl was born. None of those versions of herself had been enough to make Will stay, but maybe, just maybe, they'd been enough to help her survive when he left. Clara, she said quietly. What? Stop calling me Mrs. Thornton. That name belongs to a woman who doesn't exist anymore. She met Eli's eyes. My name is Clara. Something shifted in his expression. All right, he said. Clara. They didn't speak again until the ranch came into view, but the silence felt different now. Less like strangers, more like something else entirely. That night, after Pearl was asleep and the house had gone quiet, Clara found herself on the front porch, wrapped in a borrowed shawl, staring up at the stars. She'd never seen so many stars in Philadelphia. Never known the sky could look like this vast and overwhelming, and somehow both terrifying and beautiful at once. Can't sleep. Eli's voice came from the darkness. Clara didn't jump. She was getting used to his quiet ways, his habit of appearing without warning. Thinking too much, she said. He came to lean against the porch rail beside her. About your husband. About everything. Clara pulled the shawl tighter. A week ago, I thought I knew exactly what my life was going to look like. Ranch in Montana, house full of children, husband who loved me. She laughed bitterly. I was so stupid. You weren't stupid. You were hopeful. Is there a difference? Yeah. Eli's voice was soft. Stupid is knowing something's wrong and doing it anyway. Hopeful is believing things might work out even when the odds are against you. He paused. Hope's not a weakness, Clara. It's what keeps people alive when everything falls apart. Clara looked at him. What do you hope for? The question surprised them both. Eli was quiet for a long moment. Family, he said finally. Kids. Someone to share this place with when I'm old and gray. He shrugged. Simple things, I guess. Not very exciting. Those aren't simple things. Those are everything. Yeah. Eli's voice was rough. Yeah, I reckon they are. They stood in silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. Eli. Yeah. Thank you. For everything. The rescue, the job, all of it. Clara turned to face him. You didn't have to do any of this. I'm a stranger. I'm someone else's problem. But you made me your problem anyway, and I... Her voice cracked. I don't know how to repay that. You don't repay it. Eli's gray eyes found hers in the darkness. You pass it on. Someday, somewhere, you'll meet someone who needs help as badly as you did. And you'll help them. That's how it works out here. Clara felt tears sliding down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. I'm going to make this work, she said fiercely. The teaching, the independence, all of it. I'm going to prove that I'm worth more than Will ever gave me credit for. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. I have to prove it to myself. Eli studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. All right, he said. Then I reckon you will. He pushed off from the rail and headed for the door, pausing with his hand on the frame. Clara. Yes. For what it's worth, your husband's a damn fool. Any man who'd leave you behind is too stupid to deserve you. He disappeared inside before she could respond. Clara stood alone on the porch, the stars blazing overhead, her heart doing something strange and complicated in her chest. She barely knew this man. She'd been married to someone else less than a week ago. But somehow, standing in the cold Wyoming night, Clara felt the first fragile stirring of something she'd thought was dead forever. Hope. Not for a man she wasn't ready for, that might never be ready for that again. But hope for herself, for the life she could build, for the person she could become. Clara Thornton had been abandoned by everyone she'd trusted, but she was still standing, and she was just getting started. 3 weeks into teaching, Clara finally felt like she belonged somewhere. The children had tested her at first. Of course they had. Tommy Wallace threw spitballs. Sarah Collins whispered through every lesson. Billy Peters announced on day 1 that he didn't need schooling because he was going to be a cowboy, and cowboys didn't read. Clara handled them the same way she'd handled the blizzard, by refusing to break. Billy Peters, she said on that first day, her voice steady as iron. The greatest cowboys I've ever heard of could read trail signs, maps, and cattle brands. They could write letters home to their mothers and calculate how much their herds were worth. A cowboy who can't read is a cowboy who gets cheated. Billy had stared at her with new respect. By week 2, he was reading better than anyone in his age group. You've got a gift, Sarah Jane Hartley told her after church on Sunday. My Tommy actually wants to go to school now. That's never happened before. Clara smiled, but inside she felt something warm and unfamiliar settling into her chest. Pride, real pride, earned through her own efforts. Not reflected glory from a husband's accomplishments. Not polite applause for piano recitals. This was hers. She'd built it with her own 2 hands. The routine she developed was simple but sustaining. Early mornings at the ranch helping Aggie with breakfast. The 2-hour ride to Millbrook with Pearl bundled against her chest. Teaching from 8 until 3. Then, back to the ranch before dark, where dinner waited and the evening stretched peaceful and quiet. Eli was often there for dinner, though he spent most days out on the range with his men. He didn't say much, but Clara caught him watching her, sometimes quick glances that slid away when she looked back. She didn't know what to make of it. Didn't know what to make of the way her own heart jumped when she heard his horse in the yard. You're settling in, Aggie observed one evening while they washed dishes together. I suppose I am. Good. Aggie scrubbed at a stubborn pot. This house needed life in it. Been too quiet too long. Eli seems to like the quiet. Eli's been alone too long. Thinks he prefers it that way. Aggie snorted. He's wrong. Clara didn't respond, but something in her chest tightened. The 4th week brought the first real snow since the blizzard. Clara watched it fall from the schoolroom window, Pearl sleeping in the cradle Eli had built and brought to town specifically for her use. The children were bent over their slates practicing penmanship, and for one perfect moment, everything felt still and right. Then the door burst open. Margaret Collins, who ran the general store with her husband, stood in the doorway, her face flushed with cold, and something else. Excitement. Alarm. Clara couldn't tell. "Mrs. Thornton, there's someone here to see you." "I'm in the middle of lessons." "I know, but—" Margaret glanced over her shoulder. "She says it's urgent. She says she knows your husband." Clara's blood turned to ice. "Children, continue your practice. I'll be right back." She walked past Margaret on legs that didn't feel like her own. A woman stood in the general store clutching a small boy against her hip. She was maybe 28, dark-haired, hollow-eyed, with the look of someone who'd been traveling hard for days. When she saw Clara, something flickered across her face. Recognition. Grief. Resignation. "You're Clara Thornton," the woman said. It wasn't a question. "I am, and you are—" "My name is Margaret Crane." The woman's voice was steady, but Clara could see her hands trembling. "And I'm very sorry to tell you this, but I'm married to your husband." The world tilted sideways. Clara grabbed the counter to steady herself. "That's not possible. I wish it weren't." Margaret. The other Margaret. God, they even had the same name, shifted the boy on her hip. "His name is Samuel. He's 2 years old. William's son." Clara stared at the child. Dark hair, dark eyes, the shape of his face. Oh God. He looked like Will. He looked exactly like Will. "I don't understand," Clara heard herself say. "Will and I were married in Philadelphia 2 years ago. I have the certificate. I have—" "So do I." Margaret's voice cracked. "Married in Denver 3 years ago. I have a certificate too. And a ring. And a son who asks every day where his daddy went." Clara's legs gave out. She sat down hard on a flour barrel, her vision swimming. "He told me he was a widower," she whispered. "He said his first wife died of fever. He said—" "He told me he'd never been married at all." Margaret laughed bitterly. "Told me I was his first love, his only love, promised me we'd build a life together in Denver. Then how did you find me?" "He sent a letter." Margaret reached into her coat and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. 3 weeks ago, telling me our marriage was a mistake, telling me he'd met someone else, telling me—" her voice broke, "telling me he was taking his new wife to Montana to start fresh." Clara took the letter with numb fingers. Will's handwriting, unmistakable. The same flowing script she'd once thought so elegant. "My dearest Margaret, I regret to inform you that our arrangement can no longer continue. I have found my true happiness elsewhere. Please consider yourself free to remarry. I have taken what was rightfully mine from our shared accounts. Do not attempt to contact me. The life we had is over. William." "He called it an arrangement," Clara said hollowly. "Like you were a business deal." "I was." Margaret's eyes were wet but fierce. "We both were. Don't you see? He married me for my inheritance. My father left me $3,000 when he died. William went through it in 2 years. Then he found you." "I don't have an inheritance." "No." Margaret frowned. "He said you came from a wealthy family, old money in Philadelphia." Clara laughed. It was an ugly sound. "My family has money, but my father didn't believe in giving daughters independent wealth. Everything I brought to the marriage came from Will himself, from his business investments." "Which were my money," Margaret finished. "He used what he stole from me to court you, to convince you he was successful." The full scope of Will's deception crashed over Clara like a wave. He'd married Margaret, stolen her inheritance, used that money to transform himself into the charming businessman who'd swept Clara off her feet in Philadelphia. Then he'd married Clara too, planning to access her family's wealth through her. When that didn't work out, when Clara's father proved as tight-fisted with his daughter as Margaret's had been generous, Will had simply moved on to his next scheme. The wagon train to Montana, where nobody knew him, where nobody knew either of his wives. He was going to leave us both, Clara said slowly. Take whatever he could carry and disappear. Start over with some third woman in some third territory. Probably. Margaret's voice was exhausted. That's what men like him do. They move from victim to victim, taking everything they can, leaving destruction behind. Clara looked at Samuel, still clutching his mother's hip. Pearl's half-brother. The children were connected by blood to a man who'd betrayed them all. How did you find me? Clara asked. The letter mentioned Montana, Fort Benton specifically. I sold everything I had and bought a stage ticket. Margaret sat down on another barrel, like her legs couldn't hold her anymore either. I've been asking questions in every settlement between Denver and here. Last town someone mentioned a wagon train that passed through weeks ago, and a woman with a baby who got left behind. And you came all this way just to what? Confront me, blame me? No. Margaret's eyes met Clara's. I came because I needed to know. Needed to see for myself that I wasn't crazy. That he really did this to someone else too. Silence stretched between them. Two women bound together by the worst kind of shared experience. I should hate you, Margaret said quietly. You had him when I thought he was mine. You have his child. Pearl isn't his. The words came out fierce and protective. She carries his blood, but she'll never know him. She'll never be damaged by him. She's mine. Margaret nodded slowly. Samuel is mine too. Whatever William did, Samuel had no part in it. No. Clara looked at the little boy who was watching her with Will's dark eyes. He didn't. The door to the general store opened. Eli walked in, stopping short when he saw the scene. Clara ashen-faced on a flour barrel, a strange woman with a child, the air thick with tension. Clara. His voice was sharp. What's wrong? This is Margaret Crane, Clara said dully. She's married to my husband. Eli's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, understanding. And then something dark and dangerous that Clara had never seen before. She's what? William Thornton married me in Denver 3 years ago, Margaret said. He married Clara in Philadelphia 2 years ago. He's been moving between us ever since, taking money from one to fund the other. Son of a bitch. Eli's voice was low and deadly. That goddamn son of a bitch. He's gone, Clara said. Disappeared. Probably already working on wife number 3. Not for long. Eli turned toward the door. I'm going to find him. I'm going to drag him back here and make him face what he's done. Eli, wait. He stopped his hand on the doorframe. Don't. Clara's voice was tired. He's not worth it, and finding him won't undo what he did. It won't make Margaret's inheritance reappear. It won't give Pearl and Samuel a father worth having. He needs to pay for this. Maybe. But I'd rather spend my energy building something new than chasing someone who was never real to begin with. Eli turned back to face her. You're just going to let him go. I'm going to let him become someone else's problem. Clara stood her legs steadier now. What I need to figure out is what happens next. For me. For Margaret. For our children. Margaret looked at her with something like wonder. You'd help me. After everything? You're not my enemy. Clara moved to stand beside her. We're both victims of the same man. And out here, women need to help each other. It's the only way any of us survive. Margaret's face crumbled. She started crying deep, racking sobs that she'd clearly been holding back for days. Samuel whimpered against her shoulder, and Clara reached out instinctively, putting one hand on Margaret's arm. It's all right. You're safe now. We'll figure this out together. Eli watched them for a long moment. Then he took off his hat, ran his hand through his hair, and sighed. Aggie's going to kill me for bringing home another stray. Clara almost smiled. Is that what you're doing? Bringing her home? You got a better idea." Clara looked at Margaret, exhausted, broke, desperate. A woman with nothing but a small child and the ruins of a marriage that was never real. Clara knew exactly how that felt. "No," she said. "I don't have a better idea." "Then let's go." Eli held the door open. "It's getting dark, and I don't want to be on the road after sunset." The ride back to the ranch was silent. Clara sat in the wagon bed with Margaret, the two children, between them. Pearl slept peacefully. Samuel watched everything with wide, frightened eyes. "It's all right," Clara told him softly. "You're going to be okay." Samuel just stared at her. Clara wondered what Will had told this child, whether Samuel had any memories of a father at all, or whether Will had been as absent from his Denver family as he'd been from his Philadelphia one. When they reached the ranch, Aggie met them at the door. Her eyes swept over Margaret and Samuel, then moved to Clara, then to Eli. "Another one." "It's a long story," Eli said. "Always is." Aggie sighed heavily, but she was already stepping aside to let them in. "Well, come on then. Can't heal anything on an empty stomach." Over dinner, the full story came out. Margaret talked, and Clara listened, filling in pieces here and there. Eli sat at the head of the table, his expression growing darker with every new revelation. Aggie moved around the kitchen, keeping everyone fed, her face betraying nothing. "So let me make sure I understand," Eli said finally. "This man William, or whatever his real name is, married Margaret first, spent her inheritance, then married Clara, tried to access her family's money. When that didn't work, he convinced Clara to come west, then abandoned her in a blizzard with a baby and disappeared." "That's the sum of it," Clara said, "and nobody's looking for him." "No law." "What law?" Margaret's voice was bitter. "Out here, a woman's husband abandons her. That's her problem. A man marries two women in different territories. Who's going to prove it? Who's going to care? I care." Everyone looked at Eli. "I care," he repeated. "What he did to both of you, it's not right. There has to be something." "There's nothing." Clara's voice was flat. "Margaret's right. We could spend years trying to find him, trying to prove what he did. And at the end of it, what would we have? An arrest maybe. A trial. Our names in newspapers. Our children growing up knowing their father was a criminal." She shook her head. "I'd rather move forward." "Move forward how?" Eli demanded. "You're telling me you're just going to forget what he did?" "No, I'm telling you I'm going to survive what he did. There's a difference." Silence fell over the table. "She's right," Margaret said quietly. "I came all this way looking for answers, for closure, and I found them." She looked at Clara. "I found something else too. Someone who understands. Someone who doesn't judge me for being fooled." "Why would I judge you? I was fooled the same way." "Exactly." Margaret's voice was stronger now. "We're the same, you and I. Two women who trusted the wrong man and paid the price. But we're still here, still standing. That has to count for something." Clara reached across the table and squeezed Margaret's hand. "It counts for everything." Aggie set down a plate of biscuits with a decisive thump. "Well," she said, "if you're both staying, we'll need to sort out arrangements. House has room, but not endless room. And you," she pointed at Margaret, "will need work. Can't have idle hands around here." "I can sew." Margaret sat up straighter. "I was a seamstress in Denver before I married William. Good at it, too." "Territory needs seamstresses," Eli said slowly, his anger fading into something more practical. "Women here make their own clothes mostly, but alterations, mending fancy dresses for special occasions, there's demand." "I could do that." Margaret's eyes brightened. "I could set up a business, make my own money." "You could," Clara agreed. "We could help you get started. Eli knows everyone in the territory, and the women from church. They'd spread the word." For the first time since she'd arrived, Margaret smiled. It was a small smile, tired and tentative, but it was real. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. You don't know me. I showed up at your school and turned your life upside down. Again. Clara thought about the question. Because someone helped me when I had nothing, she said finally. Because Eli rode into a blizzard to save a stranger. Because Aggie took me in without question. Because this territory is harsh enough without women tearing each other down. She met Margaret's eyes. William wanted us to hate each other. That's probably why he never told either of us about the other. He was counting on shame and jealousy to keep us apart. Clara's jaw set. I refuse to give him that satisfaction. Margaret's eyes filled with tears again, but this time she was smiling through them. I think, she said slowly, that you and I are going to be friends. I think so too. The weeks that followed were complicated but manageable. Margaret moved into a small room off the kitchen, the same one Clara had occupied when she first arrived. She proved her skill with a needle, almost immediately mending a tear in Eli's favorite shirt so perfectly you couldn't see where the damage had been. Word spread through Millbrook. Soon, women were arriving at the ranch with fabric and requests. Margaret worked with focused intensity, her fingers flying through stitches, her face calm and concentrated. She's good, Eli observed one evening, watching Margaret work through the window. She's determined, Clara corrected. There's a difference. Seems like determination is a common trait around here lately. Clara smiled. I suppose it is. Pearl and Samuel became inseparable almost immediately. Too young to understand the complicated history connecting them, they simply recognized something familiar in each other. Pearl's first word was, Sam. Samuel's second was, Pearl. They played together, napped together, drove Aggie crazy together. Lord help me, Aggie muttered, chasing them through the kitchen. 2 of them now. This house is going to be the death of me. But she was smiling when she said it. And sometimes, late at night, Clara caught Eli watching the children with an expression she couldn't quite read. Longing, maybe. Or something deeper. Then came the telegram. It arrived on a Tuesday 6 weeks after Margaret's appearance. Caleb wrote it out from town, his young face troubled. For you, Mrs. Thornton, from the sheriff in Helena. Clara's hands trembled as she opened it. Body found near mining camp. Stop. Male late 20s. Matches. Description. Stop. Possible identification needed. Stop. Contact. Sheriff Morris Helena. Oh God. What is it? Margaret appeared at her shoulder, read the telegram, and went pale. They found him. He's dead. They found a body. They don't know if it's him. Eli took the telegram, read it twice. Someone needs to go identify it, he said, to know for certain. I'll go. Clara's voice surprised her with its steadiness. I need to see. I need to know. I'm coming with you. Margaret's jaw was set. If it's William, I need to see too. I need closure. Eli looked between them. Then I'm going with both of you. The journey to Helena took 3 hard days. Clara spent most of it in silence, staring at the landscape rolling past, trying to prepare herself for what she might find. Was Will really dead? Part of her hoped so. Hoped he'd been thrown from his horse or caught in another storm or killed by the kind of frontier justice that caught up with swindlers eventually. Another part of her, a smaller, darker part, hoped he was alive. Hoped he'd suffer. Hoped he'd spend years looking over his shoulder, knowing that somewhere out there were women he'd wronged who knew exactly what he was. The sheriff in Helena was a grizzled man named Morris, with kind eyes and no patience for nonsense. Found him in a creek bed about 15 miles out, he said, leading them toward a small building behind his office. Looks like robbery gone wrong. Multiple stab wounds. Whoever did it took everything horse money supplies. How long ago? 3 weeks, give or take. Body was pretty far gone by the time a trapper found it. Clara felt her stomach turn. I have to warn you, Morris continued. It's not pretty. Water and weather did their work. But if this is your husband, you should be able to identify him by his features, assuming you can stomach looking. I can stomach it. The body lay on a table in the center of the small morgue, covered by a white sheet that was no longer entirely white. Clara steeled herself. Morris pulled back the sheet. She looked, and knew. Even bloated and damaged by water, even after weeks of decomposition, she recognized him. The shape of his jaw, the dark hair she'd once run her fingers through, the hands that had held hers at their wedding. "It's him," she said. Her voice was steady, cold. "That's William Thornton." Margaret moved to stand beside her. "That's William Crane," she confirmed. "My husband." Morris looked between them, clearly confused. "He was married to both of us," Clara explained flatly. "Different names, different territories, same man." "Well?" Morris pulled the sheet back over the body. "I've seen a lot of things in this territory, but that's a new one." "How did he die?" Eli asked. "You said robbery." "That's what it looks like. But I've got my suspicions it might have been more personal than that." Morris moved to his desk and pulled out a small box. "We found this on him, hidden in his boot." He opened the box. Inside lay 2 wedding rings. One was Clara's, the simple gold band Will had slid onto her finger 2 years ago. The other must have been Margaret's. "He kept them," Margaret whispered. "After everything he did. After abandoning both of us. He kept our rings." Clara stared at the glittering gold. "Can we have them?" she asked. "They're yours by rights, both of you." Morris pushed the box toward them. There was also this. He pulled out a leather wallet. $47. Not much, but it's something. Found it hidden in his other boot. Whoever robbed him didn't search thoroughly. Clara took the wallet. $47. Everything that remained of William Thornton's life of lies. She divided it evenly with Margaret without being asked. "What do you want done with the body?" Morris asked. Clara and Margaret exchanged a look. "Bury him," Clara said finally. "Unmarked. He doesn't deserve a name on his grave." "He doesn't deserve a grave at all," Margaret added. "But I suppose even snakes have to go somewhere when they die." Morris almost smiled. "I'll see it done." They left Helena the next morning. The ride back was quieter than the ride out, but it was a different kind of quiet. Peaceful almost. The weight of uncertainty finally lifted. "It's over," Margaret said on the second night, staring into the campfire. "He's really gone." "Yes." Clara felt strange. Empty but clean, like a wound that had finally been drained of poison. "He's gone." "I thought I'd feel something more. Relief, satisfaction, something." Margaret shook her head. "Mostly, I just feel tired." "That's enough for now. Feelings can come later." Eli sat a little distance away, checking on the horses. "He's a good man," Margaret said quietly, following Clara's gaze. "Your Eli." "He's not my Eli." "Isn't he?" Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. "It's too soon. William's only been dead." "William's been dead to us for months. Years, maybe. The man we thought we married never existed." Margaret turned to face her fully. "Clara, I've known you for 6 weeks. And in that time I've watched that man look at you like you hung the moon. I've watched you look back." "I don't—" "Yes, you do." Margaret's voice was gentle but firm. "And you deserve to. After everything we've been through, don't we deserve something good?" Clara didn't answer. But later that night, lying under the stars, she thought about what Margaret had said. And she wondered if maybe, just maybe, she was ready to find out. They returned to the ranch on a Friday evening just as the sun was setting. Aggie met them at the door with Pearl in her arms, and Samuel clinging to her skirts. The old woman took one look at their faces and nodded slowly. It was him then. It was him. Clara took Pearl and held her close, breathing in her daughter's sweet scent. "He's dead. Buried in an unmarked grave outside Helena." "Good riddance," Aggie's voice held no sympathy for the dead man. Now maybe you can both start living instead of just surviving. Margaret went inside to check on Samuel, but Clara lingered on the porch. Her body was exhausted from 3 days of hard travel, but her mind wouldn't stop spinning. Eli had dismounted and was leading the horses toward the barn. Eli. He stopped, turned. "Thank you," Clara said, "for coming with us, for everything. Didn't do anything special." "You did. You always do." She took a breath. "You've been doing special things since the moment you pulled me out of that blizzard, and you keep pretending it's nothing." Eli shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "Clara, I know you don't like gratitude. I know you think you're just doing what anyone would do." She stepped closer. "But anyone wouldn't. The wagon train proved that. 200 people looked at me and my baby and decided we weren't worth saving. You decided differently. That was months ago. And you've kept deciding differently every day since." Clara's voice cracked. "You found me work. You took in Margaret. You rode 3 days to Helena just so we wouldn't have to face that alone. What are you saying?" The question hung between them. Clara didn't know how to answer it, didn't know if she was ready to answer it. But Margaret's words from the campfire kept echoing in her head. "Don't we deserve something good? I'm saying I see you, Eli McAllister." Clara met his eyes. "I see who you are, and I'm grateful for it. That's all." She turned and went inside before he could respond, but she felt his gaze on her back the whole way. The weeks after Helena were different. Something had shifted. Clara felt it in the way Eli looked at her now. Longer glances less quickly averted. She felt it in the way her own heart raced when he entered a room. But neither of them spoke of it. There was too much history, too much damage, too much fear of ruining the fragile peace they'd built. Margaret noticed, of course. "You're both idiots," she announced one evening while they washed dishes together. "Dancing around each other like nervous horses. Just talk to him. It's not that simple." "Why not?" Clara scrubbed at a pot that was already clean. "Because I was married to a liar. Because I trusted someone once and it nearly killed me and Pearl. Because—" She stopped. "Because I'm terrified of being wrong again." Margaret was quiet for a moment. "Clara, look at me." Clara looked. "I was married to the same liar," Margaret said gently. "I know exactly how it feels to have your trust shattered. To wonder if you'll ever be able to believe anyone again." She put down her dish towel. "But Eli isn't William. He's proven that 100 times over." "I know he's not William." "Then what are you afraid of?" The question cut straight to the heart of it. "I'm afraid of myself," Clara admitted. "I'm afraid that I don't know how to recognize a good man. I'm afraid that my judgment is so broken, I'll push away the real thing because I can't tell the difference anymore." Margaret's eyes softened. "Oh, Clara. What if I'm wrong about him? What if he's just another pretty face, hiding something ugly? What if—" "Stop!" Margaret gripped her shoulders. "Listen to me. You are not the same woman who married William Thornton. You've survived things that would have broken most people. You've built a life from nothing. You've learned to trust your own strength." She shook Clara gently. "Trust your own judgment, too." "What if I can't?" "Then trust mine." Margaret smiled. "I've watched that man for weeks. I've seen how he treats you, how he treats the children, how he treats everyone around him. Eli McAllister is exactly what he appears to be. No masks, no lies. Just a good man who doesn't know how to say what he feels." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "You really think so?" "I know so." Margaret released her shoulders. "Now stop being a coward and go talk to him." Clara found Eli in the barn brushing down his horse. He looked up when she entered and something flickered across his face. Hope, maybe. Or fear. It was hard to tell in the lantern light. Clara, everything all right? No. She closed the distance between them. Everything is not all right. I've been lying to myself for weeks and I'm tired of it. Eli set down the brush slowly. Lying about what? About you. About us. About what I feel when you walk into a room. Clara's voice shook, but she forced herself to continue. I told myself it was too soon, that I wasn't ready, that I'd just make another mistake. Clara, let me finish. She held up her hand. I've been so afraid of being hurt again, that I've been hurting both of us instead, keeping you at arm's length, pretending I don't notice the way you look at me. Eli went very still. I notice, Clara continued. I notice everything. The way you built that cradle for Pearl without being asked. The way you rode 3 days to Helena just so I wouldn't have to face William's body alone. The way you... Her voice broke. The way you make me feel safe for the first time in years. Clara. Eli's voice was rough. I need to tell you something. What? I've been in love with you since the first morning you woke up in my house. He stepped closer. That first day when you came into the kitchen looking half dead and terrified, and you still managed to hold your head up like you were ready to fight the whole world. That's when I knew. Clara's breath caught. Why didn't you say anything? Because you'd just been abandoned by your husband. Because you were broken and scared and the last thing you needed was some cowboy making demands on your heart. Eli's gray eyes burned into hers. I told myself I'd wait. I'd give you time. I'd let you heal. And if I never healed, if I was too damaged to love anyone again, then I'd have been your friend, your protector, whatever you needed me to be. His hand came up to cup her face. I wasn't going to push you, Clara, not ever. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I'm scared, Eli. I know. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can trust anyone again. I know that too. His thumb brushed away her tears. But I'm not asking you to trust me blindly. I'm asking you to watch what I do. Judge me by my actions, and if I ever give you reason to doubt me, you can walk away. What if I can't walk away? What if I'm already in too deep? Eli smiled. It was the first real smile she'd seen from him. Not the tight, controlled expression he usually wore, but something warm and open and vulnerable. Then I guess we're both in trouble. Clara laughed through her tears. I guess we are. Clara. His voice dropped low. Can I kiss you? Her heart hammered against her ribs. Yes. The kiss was gentle, careful. Nothing like William's passionate declarations that had always felt more like performances than real emotion. This was real. This was honest. This was everything Clara had stopped believing in. When they finally pulled apart, Eli rested his forehead against hers. I want to court you, he said. Properly. The way you deserve. No rushing, no pressure. Just time to know each other better. I'd like that. And Clara, yes. I'm never going to leave you. Not in a storm. Not ever. She believed him. God help her. She believed him completely. News of their courtship spread through Millbrook faster than wildfire. Clara hadn't meant to announce anything, but in a town this small, secrets were impossible. Someone must have seen Eli bring her flowers, or noticed the way they sat together at church, or caught them walking hand in hand after school one afternoon. By the following Sunday, everyone knew. About time, Sarah Jane Hartley declared after the service, hugging Clara tightly. We've all been waiting for you two to figure it out. All of you. Honey, the whole territory knew Eli McAllister was sweet on you. He's been mooning around like a lovesick calf for months. Sarah Jane laughed at Clara's expression. Don't look so surprised. A man doesn't ride into blizzards for just anyone. The children at school were equally delighted. Are you going to marry Mr. McAllister? Little Sarah Collins asked during arithmetic. I don't know yet. We're courting. What's courting? It's when two people spend time together to see if they want to get married. But you already live together, Billy Peters pointed out with devastating child logic. Ain't that the same as being married? Clara felt her cheeks flush. Not exactly, Billy. Now please return to your multiplication tables. But the questions kept coming. From the children, from the parents, from everyone Clara encountered in town. Are you engaged yet? When's the wedding? Have you set a date? Clara answered them all with patient smiles and non-committal responses. The truth was, she didn't know. She loved Eli. She was certain of that now. Loved his quiet strength and his dry humor, and the way he made her feel like she could handle anything life threw at her. But love and marriage were two different things. She'd loved William once, or thought she had. Look how that had turned out. You're overthinking this, Margaret told her one evening. I can see it in your face. I'm being careful. There's careful and there's paralyzed. Margaret looked up from her sewing. Clara, it's been 3 months since Helena. 3 months of Eli proving himself every single day. What more do you need? I don't know. Clara paced the small parlor. That's the problem. I don't know what I need to feel safe. Maybe safety isn't about feeling. Maybe it's about deciding. Clara stopped pacing. What do you mean? I mean that waiting until you feel completely secure is probably never going to happen. Not after what William did to us. Margaret set down her needle. But at some point you have to decide to trust anyway, to take the risk, to say, I'm scared, but I'm going forward. And if I'm wrong, then you'll survive it, just like you've survived everything else. Margaret's voice was gentle. Clara, you are the strongest woman I know. Whatever happens with Eli, you'll be okay. But I think you'll be more than okay. I think you'll be happy. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything Margaret had said. Deciding to trust, taking the risk, going forward even when you're scared. Around midnight, she heard horses. Clara sat up, her heart suddenly pounding. Horses at midnight meant trouble. Always had, probably always would. She pulled on her robe and hurried to the window. Eli was in the yard dismounting from his horse. He looked up and saw her face in the window. Clara, come down, please. Something in his voice made her move without questioning. She found him on the front porch holding a telegram. His face was grim. What is it? What's wrong? There's been a fire, Eli said, at the Brennan Ranch. Tom and Sarah, they lost everything. Oh God, are they? They're alive. Whole family got out. But the house, the barn, the livestock. Eli's jaw tightened. Gone. All of it. Clara thought of Sarah Jane Hartley, the woman who'd welcomed her into the community, who'd celebrated her courtship with Eli like it was her own happiness. What can we do? That's what I came to talk about. Eli met her eyes. They've got 4 children and nowhere to go. I want to offer them rooms here at the ranch, help them rebuild. But this is your home now too. I won't make that decision without you. Clara stared at him. Your home now too. He hadn't proposed yet, hadn't asked her to marry him. But he was already treating her like his partner, like her opinion mattered as much as his own. Of course we help them, she said. How is this even a question? Eli's face softened. I knew you'd say that, but I needed to ask. Eli. Clara stepped closer. This is what family does. We help. We take people in when they need it. You taught me that. I didn't teach you anything. You already knew. No. Clara shook her head. I didn't. Not really. Not until you showed me what it looked like. They stood in the cold night air, looking at each other. Clara. Eli's voice was rough. I know we said we'd take things slow. I know you're still scared. But I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Her heart stopped. What? Do you see a future with me, not tomorrow, not next week, but someday? Do you see yourself building a life here on this ranch with me? Clara felt tears spilling down her cheeks. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I see it. Then marry me. The words hung in the freezing air between them. Eli, not today, not tomorrow, whenever you're ready. He took her hands in his. But say yes. Say you'll be my wife someday. Give me something to hold on to. Clara looked at this man, this quiet, steady, impossibly good man who'd saved her life and her daughter's life, and asked nothing in return. Margaret was right. At some point you have to decide to trust anyway. Yes, the word came out stronger than she expected. Yes. Eli's voice cracked. Yes, I'll marry you. Clara laughed through her tears. Not tomorrow, but someday, yes. He kissed her then right there on the front porch in the middle of the night, with his hands cold against her face and his heart pounding against hers. It was the best kiss of Clara's life. The Brennans moved in 3 days later. Sarah Jane arrived with 4 children, a handful of salvaged possessions, and a gratitude so deep it made Clara uncomfortable. You saved us, Sarah Jane kept saying. You and Eli. We'd have frozen to death without somewhere to go. Nonsense. The whole town would have helped. The whole town offered prayers. You offered rooms. Sarah Jane hugged her fiercely. That's different. The ranch house, which had seemed perfectly sized for Clara and Margaret and Aggie and the children, suddenly felt very small indeed. But they made it work. Aggie organized sleeping arrangements with military precision. Margaret cheerfully gave up her sewing room and moved her operation to a corner of the kitchen. The Brennan children shared 2 rooms doubling up on beds. Sarah Jane and Tom took the smallest bedroom and declared it a palace. We'll rebuild, Tom kept saying. Soon as spring comes, we'll start over. Take your time, Eli told him. No rush. But Clara could see the strain in Eli's face. More mouths to feed, more bodies to house, more responsibility on his shoulders. She found him in the barn one evening just standing there staring at nothing. Eli. He turned. His face was tired. Just thinking. About what? About whether I can actually do this. He laughed bitterly. I wanted a big family, a house full of people. Be careful what you wish for, right? Clara moved to stand beside him. You're not alone in this. I know. No, I mean... She took his hand. We're partners now. Whatever weight you're carrying, I'm carrying it too. Eli looked at her. You mean that... I said yes to marrying you. That wasn't just about love, Eli. It was about this. Building something together. Sharing the hard parts. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. I don't deserve you. You do. Clara held him tight. You deserve everything. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving it. They stood there in the darkness, holding each other, while the wind howled outside and the ranch creaked around them. 2 broken people, choosing to be whole together. Spring came slowly that year. The snow melted inch by inch, revealing muddy ground, and the first stubborn shoots of new grass. The Brennans started rebuilding their ranch with help from every family in the territory, and Clara started planning a wedding. June, she decided one morning over breakfast. I want to be married in June. Everyone at the table went still. June? Eli's voice was carefully neutral. That's only 3 months away. I know. Clara met his eyes. I'm done waiting. I'm done being scared. I want to marry you in June in the church in Millbrook with everyone we love watching. Eli's face transformed. June it is. The next 3 months were a whirlwind. Margaret threw herself into making Clara's wedding dress a simple cream gown with delicate embroidery around the collar. Sarah Jane organized the reception at the ranch. Aggie took charge of the food threatening bodily harm to anyone who interfered with her menu planning, and Clara taught her students, raised her daughter, and fell more deeply in love with Eli McAllister every single day. The night before the wedding, she couldn't sleep. She slipped out of bed and found Margaret in the kitchen drinking tea. "Couldn't sleep either," Margaret smiled. "Seems to be going around." Clara sat across from her. "Margaret, I need to thank you." "For what?" "For pushing me. For not letting me hide behind my fear." Clara reached across the table to take her hand. "If you hadn't shown up in Millbrook that day, if you hadn't forced me to face what William really was, I might never have let myself love again." Margaret's eyes glistened. "You would have, eventually. Maybe. But you made it faster, easier." Clara squeezed her hand. "You're my family now. You know that, right? Not because of William. Because of everything that came after." Margaret wiped her eyes. "You're my family too. You and Eli and Aggie and the children." She laughed shakily. "Look at us. Two women abandoned by the same man, and somehow we ended up with more family than we started with." "That's the thing about this territory." Clara smiled. "It breaks you down and builds you back up, if you let it." "You're going to be happy, Clara." Margaret's voice was fierce. "You deserve to be happy. So do you." "I know." Margaret's smile turned mysterious. "And I think I will be, eventually." Clara raised an eyebrow. "Is there something you want to tell me?" "Not yet." Margaret stood and kissed Clara's forehead. "Now go to sleep. You're getting married tomorrow." Clara went, and for the first time in as long as she could remember, she slept without nightmares. The morning of her wedding, Clara woke to sunlight and the sound of Pearl laughing. She lay still for a moment listening. Her daughter's giggles mixed with Samuel's deeper chuckles, and beneath it all, Aggie's gruff voice pretending to scold them while clearly enjoying every second. This was her family now, not the one she'd been born into, not the one William had promised and destroyed. This one, built from ruins and storms and second chances. "Clara," Margaret's voice came through the door. "You awake?" "I'm awake." The door opened, and Margaret slipped in, already dressed, her dark hair pinned up elegantly. "How do you feel?" Clara considered the question. "Terrified," she admitted. "Happy, certain." She laughed. "All at once." "That's exactly how you should feel." Margaret sat on the edge of the bed. "I felt the same way when I married William." "But this is different, Clara. You know that, right?" "I know." "Good." Margaret squeezed her hand. "Now get up. We've got a wedding to get you to." The next 2 hours were a blur of activity. Margaret helped Clara into her wedding dress, the cream silk falling perfectly, the embroidery catching the light. Sarah Jane pinned her hair up with wildflowers she'd gathered at dawn. Aggie bustled in and out simultaneously, managing breakfast for 12 people and threatening dire consequences to anyone who made Clara late. "You look beautiful," Sarah Jane said, stepping back to admire her work. "Eli's going to fall over when he sees you." "He'd better not fall over. I need him standing for the vows." "He'll manage." Sarah Jane's eyes were suspiciously bright. "Clara, I want you to know what you and Eli did for us. Taking us in after the fire, we'll never forget it. You would have done the same. Maybe. But you did it first." Sarah Jane hugged her, carefully mindful of the dress. "You deserve every happiness, Clara. Both of you." The church was packed when they arrived. Clara stood outside the doors, Pearl in Margaret's arms, waiting for the signal to enter. Her heart hammered so hard she could feel it in her throat. "Mama!" Pearl reached for her. "Mama, pretty." "Thank you, sweet girl." Clara kissed her daughter's forehead. "Mama's going to marry Eli now. You remember what that means?" Pearl nodded solemnly. Eli Papa. Clara's eyes filled with tears. They'd talked about it for weeks. Whether Pearl should call Eli Papa or something else. Whether it was too soon. Whether it would be confusing. In the end, Pearl had decided for herself. The first time she'd toddled up to Eli and raised her arms saying, "Papa up," Clara had watched Eli's face transform with a joy so profound it nearly broke her heart. "That's right," Clara whispered now. "Eli's going to be your papa." The church doors opened. Clara took a breath and walked inside. Every face in Millbrook seemed to be there, crowded into pews and standing along the walls. They all turned to watch her, but Clara only saw one person. Eli stood at the altar, wearing a dark suit she'd never seen before. His hair was combed back, his face freshly shaved, his gray eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her knees weak. He looked terrified. He looked overjoyed. He looked exactly like she felt. Clara walked toward him, each step bringing her closer to the future she'd stopped believing in. When she reached the altar, Eli took her hands and his fingers were trembling. "You came," he whispered. "Did you think I wouldn't? I was afraid I'd wake up and this would all be a dream." "It's not a dream." Clara squeezed his hands. "It's real. I'm real, and I'm not going anywhere." Reverend Thomas Whitmore cleared his throat. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Elijah McAllister and Clara Thornton." The ceremony was simple and sincere. Clara barely heard the words. She was too focused on Eli's face, on the way he looked at her like she was the answer to every prayer he'd ever prayed. Then came the vows. "I, Elijah McAllister, take you, Clara Thornton, to be my lawfully wedded wife." Eli's voice was steady, despite the emotion in his eyes. "I promise to be honest with you always, to respect your strength and support your dreams, to love you through whatever storms may come." He paused, his voice dropping. "I found you on the worst night of your life. I'm going to spend every day proving that it led to the best chapter of both our lives." Clara's tears spilled over. "I, Clara Thornton, take you, Elijah McAllister, to be my lawfully wedded husband." Her voice shook but didn't break. "I promise to trust you completely, to build a life with you as equal partners, to love you not because I need you, but because I choose you." She smiled through her tears. "You saved my life, but more than that, you gave me back to myself, and I will spend the rest of my days grateful for that gift." The Reverend smiled. "By the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife." He nodded to Eli. "You may kiss your bride." Eli kissed her like they were alone in the world. The church erupted in cheers and applause. When they finally broke apart, Clara was laughing and crying at the same time. Pearl was squirming in Margaret's arms, reaching for them. "Papa, Mama!" Eli scooped Pearl up with one arm while keeping the other around Clara. "That's right, little one," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm your papa now, forever." Pearl planted a wet kiss on his cheek. Clara thought her heart might burst. The reception at the ranch was chaos, in the best possible way. Tables had been set up in the yard loaded with food Aggie had been preparing for days. Fiddle music filled the air. Children ran shrieking between the adults. Cowboys who'd ridden in from neighboring ranches danced with town women who'd never seen a ranch before today. Clara moved through it all in a daze of happiness. "Mrs. McAllister." Sarah Jane appeared at her elbow, using her new name with obvious delight. "There's someone here asking to speak with you. Says she came all the way from Philadelphia." Clara's blood went cold. Philadelphia. Older woman, very well dressed, very... Sarah Jane hesitated. Determined looking. Clara's mother. It had to be. She'd written to her mother months ago explaining everything. The abandonment, the teaching position, eventually the engagement. Her mother had written back, but the letters had been cool, distant, full of suggestions that Clara come home, that she'd had her adventure and should return to civilization. Clara hadn't expected her to come here. Where is she? Inside, parlor. Clara found Eli's eyes across the crowd. He was talking to Tom Brennan, but immediately excused himself when he saw her expression. What's wrong? My mother's here. Eli's face went through several emotions. Your mother from Philadelphia. The very same. Clara took a breath. Will you come with me? Try and stop me. They found Eleanor Thornton, seated in the parlor, her expensive dress and elaborate hat looking wildly out of place in the simple ranch house. She stood when Clara entered, her sharp eyes taking in everything: the wedding dress, the flowers in Clara's hair, the tall cowboy at her side. Mother. Clara. Eleanor's voice was cool. I see I've arrived in time for the festivities. I didn't expect you to come. Clearly. Eleanor's gaze swept over Eli. And this is the cowboy who rescued you from your foolishness. Mother. It's all right. Eli stepped forward, his hand extended. Mrs. Thornton, I'm Eli McAllister. Your daughter has told me a great deal about you. Eleanor looked at his hand like it might bite her. I'm sure she has. Mother. Clara's voice was sharp now. Eli is my husband. You will treat him with respect or you will leave. Eleanor's eyebrows rose. Well, you've certainly changed. Yes, I have. Clara moved to stand beside Eli. I've survived things you can't imagine. I've built a life I'm proud of, and I've married a man who loves me for who I am, not what I can give him. Unlike William. The name hung in the air. You knew, Clara said slowly. You knew something was wrong with him. I suspected. I couldn't prove anything. Eleanor's composure cracked slightly. I tried to warn you. You wouldn't listen. No, I wouldn't. Clara took a breath. I was young and foolish and convinced I knew better than everyone. You were right about him. Is that what you want to hear? I want to hear that you're happy. Eleanor's voice was suddenly thick with emotion. I want to know that my daughter hasn't thrown her life away in some God-forsaken wilderness. Clara stared at her mother. In all her life, she'd never heard Eleanor Thornton admit to wanting anything so openly. I'm happy, Mother. Clara reached for Eli's hand. Happier than I've ever been. This isn't what either of us planned, but it's good. It's real. And I'm not throwing anything away, I'm building something new. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. Then, to Clara's absolute shock, her eyes filled with tears. Your father would be proud of you. Clara's throat tightened. Would he? He always said you were stronger than you knew, braver than you believed. Eleanor wiped her eyes quickly, as if embarrassed by the display of emotion. I thought he was wrong. I thought you were too soft for the world. But you proved me wrong, Clara. You survived. I did more than survive. Yes. Eleanor's gaze moved to Eli. It seems you did. She stepped forward, and for the first time in years pulled Clara into an embrace. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry I wasn't there when you needed me. Clara hugged her back, feeling something old and wounded finally beginning to heal. You're here now. That's what matters. Eleanor stayed for 3 days. It was the strangest, most wonderful visit of Clara's life. She watched her proper Philadelphia mother learn to gather eggs from the chicken coop, saw her playing with Pearl and Samuel, getting her expensive dress dirty and not seeming to care, heard her actually laugh at one of Aggie's sharp-tongued comments. Your mother's not what I expected, Eli admitted one evening. She's not what I expected either. Clara leaned against him. I think losing me changed her, made her realize what actually matters. And what actually matters? Family. Connection. Being there for the people you love. Clara looked up at him. The same things this territory taught me. When Eleanor left, she pressed an envelope into Clara's hands. What's this? Your inheritance. what your father should have given you from the start." Eleanor's voice was brisk, but her eyes were soft. "Use it however you see fit. Build something. Make a life. Be happy." Clara opened the envelope and gasped. $5,000. A fortune. "Mother, I can't." "You can, and you will." Eleanor was already climbing into the stagecoach. "Consider it an apology for not trusting you, for not believing in you." She paused. "For not being the mother you deserved." "Mother." "Goodbye, Clara." Eleanor smiled, and for the first time it reached her eyes. "I'll visit again in the spring, if you'll have me." "Always." Clara's voice was choked. "Always." The stagecoach pulled away, and Clara stood clutching $5,000 and wondering how her life had become so strange and so beautiful all at once. The years that followed were everything Clara had never dared to dream. She continued teaching, expanding the school, until it needed its own building instead of the back room of the church. Eli's ranch prospered, growing until it was one of the largest in the territory. Together they built something neither could have built alone. Margaret married a widower rancher named James Cooper the following spring. His wife had died in childbirth, leaving him with 3 children under 5. Margaret stepped into the chaos like she'd been born for it. Her seamstress business thriving alongside her new role as mother to 4 children. "Who would have thought?" she said at her wedding, laughing with Clara. "2 abandoned wives, and look at us now." "Look at us now," Clara agreed. They never lost touch, never forgot what they'd survived together. Their children grew up as cousins, connected by something deeper than blood, connected by the shared history of their mothers. The ranch house filled with life. Clara and Eli had 3 more children together, 2 boys and a girl, and Pearl grew up calling Eli Papa, without hesitation or confusion. She learned to ride before she could properly run. She helped with the cattle, charmed the ranch hands, and drove Aggie to affectionate distraction. "That child is going to be the death of me," Aggie said regularly. But she said it while sneaking Pearl extra cookies and teaching her to make biscuits and telling her stories about the old days. Aggie lived to see her 80th birthday, still sharp as a tack and running the kitchen like a general. She died peacefully in her sleep one winter night, and they buried her on the hill overlooking the ranch next to Eli's parents. She was family, Eli said at the funeral, his voice breaking. Not by blood, by choice. Clara held his hand and thought about all the families she'd had in her life. The one she'd been born into, distant and proper and ultimately disappointing. The one William had promised, built on lies and doomed from the start. And this one. The one she'd built from nothing, with people who'd chosen her and whom she'd chosen back. This was the real one. This was the one that mattered. On their 10th anniversary, Eli took Clara back to the spot where he'd found her. The prairie looked different now, or maybe Clara was the one who was different. Either way, the place that had once seemed like the end of everything now felt like a beginning. "Do you remember what you said when I found you?" Eli asked. "I threatened you with a skillet." He laughed. "Before that, you said you didn't know me, that you couldn't trust a stranger." "I was terrified." "You were smart." Eli pulled her close. "But you took the chance anyway. You got on my horse and let me bring you home." "Best decision I ever made." "Really?" He looked down at her with those gray eyes that still made her heart skip after a decade. "Even better than saying yes when I proposed. That was the second best decision." Clara smiled. "The first was trusting you that night. Everything else grew from that." They stood in silence, watching the sun set over the Wyoming prairie. "Thank you," Clara said suddenly. "For what? For riding out into that storm, for not being the kind of man who turns away." She turned to face him fully. "For saving my life, and then making it worth living." Eli cupped her face in his hands. "I didn't save your life, Clara. You saved yourself. I just gave you a place to do it." "That's not true." "It is." His voice was fierce. You survived that storm before I ever found you. You kept Pearl alive. You were ready to fight me with a cast-iron skillet." He smiled. "All I did was point you toward something worth fighting for." "You pointed me toward yourself." "Nah." Eli kissed her forehead. "I pointed you toward the life you deserved. I just got lucky enough to be part of it." Clara thought about arguing but decided against it. Some debates weren't worth winning. Some truths were more important than being right. That night, lying in bed with Eli's arms around her and the sound of their children sleeping down the hall, Clara thought about the woman she'd been 10 years ago. Naive, trusting, convinced that life would work out because she wanted it to. That woman had been shattered by William Thornton's betrayal, left to die in a blizzard by people she'd trusted, abandoned by everyone she'd counted on. But from the ruins of that woman, someone stronger had emerged. Someone who knew that trust was earned, not given. Someone who understood that family was about choice, not blood. Someone who had learned that the worst nights could lead to the best chapters if you were brave enough to keep going. Clara Thornton had been left behind in a storm. But Clara McAllister had found her way home. Not to a place, though this ranch was the only home she'd ever need. Not to a man, though Eli was the partner she'd stopped believing existed. To herself. To the woman she'd always had the potential to become. To a life built on truth instead of lies, on chosen family, instead of broken promises, on love that proved itself through action every single day. The woman who'd clutched her baby in a broken wagon waiting to die could never have imagined this. But Clara could imagine it now, could live it now. And she intended to keep living it fiercely, gratefully, completely, for all the years she had left. Because that was the lesson the territory had taught her. That was the truth the storm had revealed. That was the gift Eli McAllister had given her when he'd ridden out of the blizzard and offered her his hand. You don't find home. You build it. With the people who stay when everyone else leaves. With the love that shows up in actions, not just words. With the courage to trust again, even when trust has been shattered. Clara McAllister had built her home. And nothing, not storms, not lies, not betrayal, not time itself would ever take it away from her again.